It is the appointed 1 o'clock hour. This was the time and place set and publicly announced for a meeting of the Alaska Royalty Oil and Gas Development Advisory Board. I'm Mark Johnson, Chair of the board. I guess we'll start. Let me start for those online. It'll maybe help a little bit to understand, to go around the table here in the room and identify the people that are present with me here in the room so people understand who's here. So I'll start here.
My name is Chalendra Veerasinghe. I go by CD, Commercial Analyst, UOG.
Ryan Fitzpatrick, Commercial Analyst, Division of Oil and Gas.
Johnny Mesa, Commercial Analyst, Division of Oil and Gas.
Adi Chobal, also Commercial Analyst in the division.
Yeah, Derek Nottingham, Director of the Division of Oil and Gas.
Colleen Glover, Tax Division Director, and delegate for the Commissioner of Revenue on the board.
Okay, so you are an important person. You count. You count today. Very good. Let's go. I will indicate with what I see on the screen here. With me electronically via this Zoom or whatever it is facility. Board members David Eisenberger, Ted Leonard, Tom Walsh.
Actually, Eisenberg, no
Sorry. Tom Walsh, Martin Anderson, and just joining us via video is Commissioner Julie Sandy. Commissioner, I know this is all new to you, but we really appreciate you coming in. We don't anticipate taking up too much of your time today, but the work we need to have done is important. Starting out, I'm Mark Johnson. I'm the chair of the Royalty Oil and Gas Board. So I'll start with that. I believe we have a quorum present and ready to do business. The purpose of today's meeting, as I see it, and I'll call on Mr. Mesa to fill in anything I miss, is to the greatest extent possible, address any questions that the board members may have relative to the best interest findings for the two publicly noticed disposals of crude oil to Petrostar and to Marathon. So that's questions that we have. We will potentially hear any public comment from members of the public that may seek to offer that comment today. But the focus today is to fill out the record, make sure that we have a full and complete record, and we have to be kind of formal about it. So that is our focus today. When we get to the meeting of next week, the first thing we will do is assuming there's no late filed public comments or no pending questions that need to be answered from staff that have been posed by board members, the first thing we'll do at the meeting of next week will be to close the record. And then we will move to deliberate on the proposed contracts and potentially make a recommendation as a board regarding to the legislature as to whether or not we believe they should be adopted. So that's the rough plan. I want to make as a matter of record that this meeting public notice was published on a date, and Johnny, can you tell me what day this was published?
I believe it was January. Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, it was January 28th when we published the best interest findings.
Okay.
And the meeting was publicly noticed, I believe, February the 10th.
Okay. I'm trying to get some preliminary stuff in. So that's the public notice. We have also, and he was generous about this, there's a document. There's two documents we need to recognize. One is the actual publication. We have received the appropriate documentation regarding the public notice for these meetings. We've received, but this documentation relates to the publishing of the best interest findings, giving notice to the public that the state tentatively entered into these contracts, and this was a time to comment on the contract. So this document that I'm holding notes here, was received back by the division on February 9th is the public notice that was issued. So that becomes a matter of record in this proceeding. The other thing that we need to make a matter of record is that we received, and staff provided this to me, in response to, let me get this straightened out. Well, there's my answer. Okay. There were 3 expressions of interest in the acquisition of royalty oil that were received by the state. And the documents that I'm holding in my hand here that I will make a matter of record, and as appropriate, we can distribute to the board members so they know what's in them. There were letters of interest filed with the state by Marathon back on September 27th, 2021. Another response on September 30th, 2021, filed with the state by Petrostar. And third, a response from ConocoPhillips dated September 27th, 2021. And these 3 expressions of interest were the documents that gave rise to the negotiations that occurred between the division and these companies. So these 3 expressions of interest will also be made a matter of record as proceeding. So before I kind of launch into questions, Mr. Mesa, do you have anything that you'd like to add where we are today?
Thank you, Chair. Just very briefly, I would like to share where we are in the process, something that we talked about before as well. But we will have, as everybody knows, 2 meetings of the Royalty Board, and the Royalty Board will make a decision whether to write a recommendation to the legislature on the proposed contracts that we are presenting to you. Right after that, the Department of Natural Resources plans to submit bills to the legislature for their consideration of approvals of these contracts. And the timing of that, we are targeting that to be right after the meetings of the Royalty Board, and so that we can have a decision by the legislature by middle of April.
Okay, thank you for that. At this point, before we launch into to see if members of the board have questions regarding the best interest findings and the tentative contracts that have been arrived at, are members of the board, do you have any questions about the process or any concerns that you want to get into at this point before we launch into that discussion? It's not required, but I want to give it out to people to reflect on that if there were questions or comments that people want to make.
Just a question, are we gonna get
Ms. Glover.
the public, whatever comments, the public comments on the best interest findings?
We will touch upon that. This
Okay.
is the forum upon
Okay.
which we will entertain the public comments, if any.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you for making that question. Okay, not hearing any further inquiry, this is the time and place, and the purpose of this meeting is to entertain any questions that board members may have of the staff relative to the 2 proposed best interest findings and contracts. And I don't think if you have a question about a particular contract, you should make reference to it. It's generic to both contracts, that's fine and good. We can address it in that way, but please be specific if you're asking a question about a specific contract. With that, the floor is open for questions by board members regarding the contracts. Absent hearing anything, I guess I'd like to, at this point, recognize Mr. Mesa. I had posed a question that I had via email to members had not seen. The purpose, part of the thing we're doing here today is making sure it's all a matter of record. So I will I will read the question that I posed to him, and I believe staff is prepared to provide a response to the question. This question was posed by me on Monday via email, and it reads as follows. During the entire, and I have to start, there's an assumption that's a little wrong in here, but I'll fix it when we get done. During the entire time these two contracts were being negotiated, the value of crude oil worldwide steadily increased. For purposes of evaluating the overall value of these proposed contracts to the state, which aspects of the evaluation will be more positively affected by the increase in crude oil price over time? The next question, why or why not? The third question, are there any aspects that will be adversely affected by an ongoing increase in crude oil prices? Those are the three kind of questions I posed just to make it clear to people. And I think this is clear. I looked at some out of definition, but there were deviations. There were some rises and falls in the price of oil, but as a general proposition, we started out at a lower level, and during the process, we finished at a higher level. So that's the intent of the question. Mr. Meza, would you please respond to the question?
Thank you. I will ask my colleagues, Chalinda Warasinga, to take the first stab at that question, and we will complement on that because we discussed that too.
Okay.
Thank you, Johnny. Chair, so we, this was a topic that was very involved, and we did inquire on multiple fronts as to a reasonable response. And the we reached is it's a little ambiguous what the overall net effect would be, just because from a response to price versus how changes in price would actually change preferences from consumers and sellers. It's a little hard to know where the net effects would fall in the longer term. One thing that we did note is that, as you had mentioned, while we were negotiating, the prices were responding in a certain way. And so DNR as well as the buyers took note of that and incorporated that into their calculus. And one refrain that we've heard repeatedly is that the expectation is prices would be lower for longer. So, so whatever expectations that they built up on the short term, based on short-term price fluctuations, that would be the expectation. So on the aggregate, once again, to revert back to the response, it's a little difficult to say exactly what the net effect would be.
I'll ask this question. In the course of the negotiations, you say that the potential takers indicated that they thought prices would tend to go lower in the long run. How did the state respond to that, or did you respond to that?
Hi, this is Johnny. I would say that those expectations were shared openly, much like any other expectations in the evolution of price that would actually take place. Those expectations may be proven wrong or correct. With respect to these contracts, it matters naturally the price of oil because it would represent the total proceeds that the state receives from selling that oil. What also matters to us is the extra revenue that the state would get by selling royalty oil in kind in comparison to royalty oil in value. When we focus on that additional revenue, the level of prices do not become a priority factor, but only when you look at the total proceeds, which is also important. What my colleague CD was also referring to is we will get a greater total proceeds from a higher price of oil. However, that also depends on what the reaction of the refineries will be as buyers. If that higher price of oil translates into lower demand for refined products, then the buyers, the refiners, might not nominate as much royalty oil as they could have in the absence of that higher price of oil. So that's going back to the argument. It is difficult to estimate which one will dominate.
If I might, to get to that result where there might be some curtailment curtailment in demand, that would probably suggest a real extreme high price of oil.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
Okay,
And we're not aware of particular details of who the buyers, how their reaction will be to those prices of the refined products, but we can make the case that there could be some sort of curtailment, as you put it.
so let me ask this follow-up question then. Is it fair to say that in evaluating my initial questions, that your analysis indicates that there is an increasing overall price of crude oil is not going to raise any red flags that this is a bad transaction? There's nothing that's real obvious that sticks out, that this is that increasing the price of oil is going to result in a bad deal for us
No, not at all.
or a poor decision.
No, not at all. I would say, yes, I would say that our mandate is to overcome the value, to have a greater value than the royalty in value. And we for other reasons, we believe we're going to meet that.
This is outside of the question that I posed, but it seems that in the last few days, the last week with the international situation, that questions of security of supply have arisen. Have you folks given any thought to the additional value that accrues to residents of Alaska if we can make sure, or damn sure, that we've got oil and gas, crude oil here in Alaska to refine? It seems to me that that is I know it's difficult to quantify, but that is a clear benefit to Alaskans to have the additional assurance that we know that this product is going to be refined in state. And if anything, that adds to the value of executing these contracts. Is that true?
I would agree too. My colleagues have more specific numbers as to how much this provision of oil from the state represents out of the total demand from the refineries.
Yeah, for example, Petrostar, I believe the two refineries combined is around 82,000 barrels per day. And this contract represents around 15 to 16% of that.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Oh, sorry, Audie Trouble here. No, I was going to say for the Marathon refinery, they produced about 55,000 barrels of refined product a day. Their plant capacity is about 68,000. They don't run it at the full maximum capacity. And then this proposed contract is about 10 to 15,000 barrels per day of supply. So you can kind of estimate the fraction there. I think it's around 15% as well.
So it sounds like they're very similar.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I will stop and see if my colleagues have questions or even reactions to the dialogue we've had with the staff.
Chair, this is oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Ted, I think you're speaking. Ted, you have the floor.
I was just wondering again, as we compare the two different type of sales where we take the value or the oil, none of these factors have really affected the net back pricing that you're using for comparison with the with the environment that just changed in a week, and transportation cost, and again, the cost of oil going up and all of that. So the staff feels very comfortable still in the analysis of the results, even with these market factors that are constantly changing right now.
So I can take it, that first attempt. Yes, our analysis, based on our analysis, we feel confident that the benefits that we are expecting from these contracts will remain even in these volatile market conditions. And when referring back to 2020, we have a shorter period of time during that year where the price of oil had declined. Even in that extreme event, the state was still able to generate a positive revenue, also additional revenue.
Yeah, thank you, Chair.
Other questions? comments? Even concerns?
I got a couple other
Uh,
questions.
Ms. Glover?
I have a,
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, who was speaking? I'm sorry.
that was Marty.
Marty, please go ahead, and then Colleen after that.
Yeah, I just want a clarification and a follow-up question. Did I hear that of the amount of oil that we'll be providing to Kenai Refinery, if this sale were to be approved, provides about 10 to 15,000 barrels a day? Did I hear that correctly?
That's the nomination range that's been agreed to with Marathon for this proposed contract. Yes, 10 to 15,000 barrels per day.
Okay, thank you. And then a follow-up question, this goes back to Chairman. He mentioned that the value of this oil, obviously with world conflict, could be more important to the state, to the workforce. Is there any considerations at this point that amount of oil could be increased? That's for the chair.
I'd have to turn to Johnny and ask the question. I don't know.
Yes, that's a great question. The contract has a provision, both contracts have a provision that if the refineries would like to nominate an extra amount in comparison to what was originally agreed, they have that ability.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Glover.
So kind of similar question, and I haven't seen the expressions of interest. Were the amounts in the contracts based on what the proposal came back and those companies said, we're interested and we want X amount, or is the amount in the contracts from the state?
Thank you. So yeah, the solicitation of interest was published for specifically that purpose, to get feedback from potential participants in the market that would have interest in buying royalty oil in kind, and they will express their desired demand for that oil. We will take that as an input and check how much royalty oil we will have available to sell.
But the end result was also influenced by the dynamic negotiation process. So where we ended up actually the numbers were pretty different from what they originally proposed.
I just had one comment I thought would maybe be helpful to this particular question, is that the total royalty oil that this, the level that the state's at now is about 50,000 barrels. So it kind of gives you a sense of the proportion that's going to be allocated according to these contracts. If you add up the two, ranges for the two refineries, it's about half, roughly, of the total royalty oil available to, that the state is currently receiving.
Okay, thank you for that. Just procedurally, and I think I alluded to this before we got started here, unless there's some serious problem, it's my intention to request that the staff copy these expressions of interest and distribute them to all parties here today, so that we know exactly what the universe is. So these are the earlier expressions that I talked about, but everybody's gonna get a copy of these. Okay, are there further questions?
Mr. Chair, this is Tom Walsh.
Mr. Walsh, please.
Yes, I have a couple of questions. I wondered if the governing statute does allow for the provision or the consideration of the value that was discussed in an earlier question of the benefit of the availability of refined product here in the state of Alaska. Does the statute allow for consideration of that in this decision?
Good question. There are two statutes that apply. The best authority for that would be a representative from the Department of Law, but I'll do
I
it.
just asked because it may come up in the legislative process.
This is Emily Feenstra from Department of Law.
Excellent.
Yeah, I think that's covered in 3806070 sub 2. So this is the statute that sets forth the various considerations the royalty board can look at. And sub 2 says one of those is the existence and extent of present and projected local and regional needs for oil and gas products and byproducts, the effect of state or federal commodity allocation requirements, which might be applicable to those products and byproducts, and the priorities among competing needs.
And to be clear, that's Alaska Statutes 3806070A2.
Yes, thank you for that.
Yeah. Are there questions about that? Follow-up questions about that on that topic? Thank you for that response.
Thank you. That's wonderful to hear that answer. One other question I have is it fair to say that this arrangement of sale of royalty oil like this provides some level of hedge to both the state and to the buyer regarding wild swings in oil price? Is that something that is a benefit to either party in the case of either rising cost or decreasing value?
Thank you. That's a fair question. There is no hedge provisions in the contract. The price of oil being assessed at the U.S. West Coast is determined by assessments of reporting agencies such as Platts and Reuters, and we take that price as assessed by the market, and that is one input into what will become the price of the royalty oil that we sell.
So what's the increment though? What is that, a daily calculations in, or?
They report the price in a daily basis, and we take the monthly average.
Okay, daily basis, monthly average. Okay.
So there's at least a monthly benefit against
Might be.
dramatic swings, I guess, but.
Now I understand the question.
Yeah.
Yes, if there are dramatic deviations, such as in 2020, where the price of oil was negative for a couple of days, what matters for the contract are the monthly average values.
Okay, that's great. That answered my question. Thank you.
Okay.
My colleague.
Yes.
I just had one quick comment I thought may be helpful, just to reiterate again, Johnny had mentioned in a previous answer that the price fluctuations in, market prices for crude affect both RIK and RFA in a similar manner, because both you kind of use that starting destination value, price. So those both rise and fall together roughly for both RIK and RFV.
Okay. Thank you. Additional questions?
Yeah.
David.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. And I may not phrase this correctly, so I may need a little assistance from some of my fellow board members. Through the legislative budget process, is there a presumed value of these contracts embedded in budgets currently being formulated?
So the question was about this being part of the budget.
Yes.
Yeah, I don't think, as far as I know, I don't think budget is generated assuming a particular value of the proceeds from this contract. I would say that the contribution of the total value of these contracts with respect to the budget of the state of Alaska is rather small. Just to put things in perspective, we're selling, like my colleague was saying, we could be selling between 25,000 barrels per day or 30,000 barrels per day. When you compare that to the total amount of royalty oil, that's certainly less than half of whatever revenue we could receive in total. And in terms of budget, royalty is just one component. You have to factor in taxes as well.
Well, I think it would be included in the revenue forecast for royalty revenue is where you see it, and the budget is kind of separate, right? we do a projection for revenue, the legislature does their budget based on projected revenues, but it would be included in the royalty revenue forecast.
And if I could, just a follow-up question then, what would have been dollar-wise built into that revenue forecast? Right, because revenue forecasts, I believe, would already have been formulated.
Yeah, if I could kind of jump in, my former legislative experience, the governor put together a budget that he submitted to the legislature in the fall, or late fall, early winter. And that was supported by a revenue forecast. And then Colleen's people, I'm sure it was always magic when I was there, is that the March revenue forecast that DNR came up with was really critical. That may still be the case. It's probably still the case. So there'll be adjustments based on the most recent predictions of the Department of Revenue that the legislature will take into account when they ultimately pass a budget. And they may, I don't know, that's almost a legislative finance kind of question as to whether or not they'll go in and update the potential fund sources on the revenue side in the budget bill that's actually passed. But that's a fairly detailed question, David. We could find out if it was really important. But you're right. At some point, it's going to be reflected. Then we can discuss to what extent it's significant, but the answer is yeah. It is reflected. I'm not sure if it's going to be a showstopper for anybody. It's a factor.
Yeah, and I'm just surmising it would be good to know whether it's going to be a high five and an excitement, or a, gosh, we're, X million below where we thought we'd be.
Colleen could probably comment. My general understanding is that we're a lot better off than we thought we were going to be.
Yeah, I don't know if they're I think what he's asking is what's the projected incremental revenue from these contracts?
Yes.
Over the 3 and 5 year periods, and maybe that's something that
Yeah.
DNR can follow up. I think that's what he's wanting to know. And as far as being in our forecast, until it's an actual contract and an obligation or agreement with the state, we wouldn't be forecasting it in our official forecast for revenue. We don't forecast on potential changes or potential legislative changes. So it wouldn't be until legislature actually approve the contracts if they go forward. And then we would have the information from DNR, and that would get incorporated would be till our fall 2022 forecast.
But we do have those estimates in the documents at CDE.
Yeah. So the chair, for the Petrostar contract, the incremental value of the contract would be based on a conservative estimate, taking into consideration netback prices and DOR's official forecast, is around 17 to 19.2 million for the 5 years of the contract.
Okay.
And for Marathon? And then for Marathon, it's a proposed 3-year contract. And again, similar, depending on the assumptions you make, but, for our base case estimate, we assume during that 3 years, it'd be about 11 to 16 million barrels is for the base case estimate. And that would translate to an incremental value, we estimate from about 9 to about 13.8 million. For the 3-year contract with Marathon.
Thank you.
Okay. Additional questions? I guess I wanted to back away. Commissioner Sandy, I know that this is all new to you, and it may be more than you really wanted to get involved in, but I wanted to see if you have any general concerns. I know we haven't heard from you, and I wanted to make sure that if you have concerns of a particular type, that we can recognize them and address them in some way. You're still muted, ma'am.
I think she's indicating her mic's not working, Chair.
Okay. So, okay, thank you. She said, thank you. I could read lips on that one. Okay, but thank you. I just wanted to give you that opportunity. We do welcome you to the group, and hopefully we'll get that sorted out later. Are there further questions, inquiries on the part of the members of the board? I'm not hearing any, I'm not seeing any. One of the very important elements of today and purposes of today's meeting was to hear if we were going to have any comments from the public. And Johnny, I'd ask to you to quickly review to see if there's anybody that appears to be a member of the public that we might want to recognize and hear from.
So thank you, Chair. I see Mr. Casey Sullivan, but I'm not sure if he can hear us or he can see us.
I can hear and see you, and I'm with Marathon Petroleum and just listening on the deliberation here today. And I appreciate. I do want to send a comment out to the staff at DNR, and just from our perspective, you guys have been great to work with. It's been a good deliberation. We've had a great working relationship with your staff and the state over the previous contract of 5 years. And then the 1 year extension, and now in this potential 3-year contract. So we appreciate all the effort of the staff and look forward to the next step. I'm happy to answer any questions from our end if you have them, but if not, thank you.
I guess it's Mark Johnson, Mr. Sullivan, I guess a quick question is that, did you have any advocacy? I assume you'd be arguing in favor of adoption of this contract. Do you have any advocacy one way or the other relative to this contract or to the Marathon contract?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, we support the contract as proposed. Thank you.
Okay, well, it's important to hear that, and we appreciate your testimony. Is there anybody else that you've been able to identify, Johnny, that might be a public that wants to offer a comment?
No one else I can see.
Who's David?
David Eisenberg.
Hi, you guys. This is Commissioner Sandy. I apologize
Excellent.
for the technical issues, and thanks very much for checking in to make sure I was doing okay. And I don't have any questions. I'm new to the process, so I'm still in information gathering mode, but I appreciate all of your patience, and I'll just keep learning.
Oh, okay, and just to kind of put things up in response to you, is that understand that we have a meeting next week. At that meeting, we're going to close the record on this matter, and then this board will deliberate and hopefully reach some sort of decision about whether or not it intends to recommend these contracts to the legislature. So we're gathering information today. We're going to deliberate as a board next time and hopefully take action as next time. Your participation next week is also important to us.
I got it. Thank you.
Okay. I have, absent hearing any, we have not identified any other public comments that need to be made. I guess I'll ask one more time. Are there any other inquiry, questions, comments from board members regarding these proposed 2 contracts? Hearing none and seeing none, that actually that accomplishes what we need to have accomplished here today. And our work here is done. I would ask Johnny Mesa one more time to talk about our schedule.
Thank you, Chair. So we just concluded the first meeting of the Royalty Board, and the next one will be March 9th, where we expect the deliberation and resolution by the board. Should the board decide to write a recommendation to the legislature on these 2 contracts, DNR, the Department of Natural Resources, will be prepared to submit bills to the legislature. Our legislative liaison has been preparing that with the legislators, with the House Resources Committee and Senate Resources Committee, and they will be likely requesting hearings from the department as well on these contracts.
Okay, thank you for that. Just so people know, the intention is that the record will remain open until we convene next week at the next meeting, at which time I will entertain a motion to close the record. But the record will remain open in case there are any late filed public comments, or in case any board member has additional questions that they want to pose that ought to be a matter of record. So that is the process we're going to engage in. I look forward to seeing you all next week when we can hopefully take action on these two contracts.
Yeah, question.
Mr. Chair,
Go ahead.
sorry, Mr.
Tom,
Chair.
go ahead and then-
Sorry. This is Mr. Walsh. Just, may I ask one procedural question before we complete? The preliminary best interest finding is subject to change, as I understand. Will there be a final best interest finding before the meeting on the 9th?
Thank you for the question. Yes, there will be a final best interest finding that will address any public comments after the chair or the board in general decides to close the record. So most likely that publication of the final best interest finding will occur after that meeting, just so to allow the staff address those comments.
Thank you, Mr. Mesa, through the chair.
Ms. Glover.
Has there been public comments provided? I thought people could provide written public comments.
Thank you. Yes, in our publication of the preliminary best interest finding and publication in the newspapers and public notice website of the state of Alaska, we did open or provide the public an opportunity to submit comments in writing or via email, and also in this meeting, but we have received none.
So obviously, if we do receive anything, we will, that'll be an important part, an important addition to the record. So that's the whole idea here. So, okay, any other comments by board members? Thank you all for your participation. Any comments, further comments from staff?
Just to thank everybody for their time and have a great rest of your day.
Okay, we will meet next March 9th. I believe it's the time. Is it 1 o'clock as well?
Yes.
Okay. I look forward to seeing people. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Walsh, seconded by Mr. Eisenberg. Yes. All those in favor of adjourning, please raise your hand and or say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed? Hearing none. We are adjourned. Thank you very much for your time. And Ted, you can go to your next event.